Hi, shalom, and welcome again to another edition of Seekers of Meaning, the podcast of Jewish Sacred Aging. I am your host, Rabbi Richard Address, and I greatly appreciate you being with us. With these podcasts, we hope to explore issues that touch us and our families and our community in light of the continuing revolution in longevity. We appreciate your support, and you can follow us and listen to previous podcasts and view them by going to our website, jewishsacredaging.com, as well as our Jewish Sacred Aging Facebook page. And it is with great pleasure that we welcome to today's Seekers of Meaning podcast and TV show Rabbi Jill Maderer, the senior rabbi of Congregation Rodeph Shalom in beautiful downtown Philadelphia. Rabbi Maderer, Jill, nice to see you. Nice to see you. And thank you very, very much for giving. I know you're swamped with stuff, but thank you for joining us. And how are you doing? How are you feeling?
Thank you, Richie. Thank you for this invitation. It's really wonderful to see your face, and I'm doing all right. How are you holding up?
We're, one moment at a time. It used to be one day at a time. Now it's kind of like compressed into one moment at a time, and such is life. But as long as you're vaccinated, you're healthy, your family's okay. I'm
on my road to vaccination. I'm partway there. Family's healthy. Okay. We're all doing our best, like everyone is. Thanks. Yeah.
Great. So, as we've talked about, this is part of a Seekers of Meaning series that we're putting together now in the end of April, the beginning of May. Well over a year now in the pandemic, of trying to explore how we're emerging from this. I mean, for the audience of Jewish Sacred Aging, elders in many congregations, we've actually, according to the statistics, making it through this pandemic pretty well. But we're turning our attention a lot of times to the institutions, the congregations, educational situations, our relationship to Israel, the whole rise in electronics and what's that going to do. So let me start out with something really nice and easy. Why not? So look, we've been in this for now 14, 15 months. Looking back, what's been the greatest sense of change and shift in your rabbinate with Rodeph Shalom in Philadelphia?
I think that in many ways, the shifts in my rabbinate are the shifts we're all experiencing as human beings in these past months. And that is a total recalibration of our lives, our work, and our purpose. No small thing, but actually something that Judaism, that religion has something to say something about. We actually have really a contribution to make to that journey we're all on. Personally, I feel that I'm sort of midway in my career, hopefully, if I continue to be healthy and strong. And it's an interesting time to have this experience of forced reinvention and quick, nimble, forced reinvention. And it's been a creative time in my rabbinate. It's also been a tragic time to be in the community and in the world, to see such loss, both loss of health and also loss of living the fullness of life. And it's as tragic as it is, and this is not how human beings should live, as tragic as it is, we have found our lessons in it. We have found the learning in it, and we have found meaning and connection even as well.
So walk me through that in the congregation. I mean, it's a historic congregation. For those of you who don't know Philly, it's one of the more historic congregations in the movement, in the Reform movement. It's also one of the most historic congregations in our area in Philadelphia. If you had to pinpoint one or two things that you've seen significantly shift in the culture of RS during this year, a little over a year, what would they be? What would have been?
I think what stands out for me is a certain openness that we've experienced. I think personally, I've had to be open to new ways of doing things. I've had to be open to new learning. I've had to be open to, I'm a planner. That's just my personality. And a year ago, I couldn't plan beyond a day or a week. And I've had to shift personally. That's been my own spiritual journey. I think that there's an openness among our congregants when we come on to Zoom for the many virtual gatherings we have. There's a certain compassion that exists at the foundation. The first couple of minutes, there's always some conversation about someone's technical difficulties, right? I can't open this, or how do I see that in the chat? And there's such compassion. There's this tech help that happens that one congregant will just reach out to the next and say, oh, try this or try that. And there's a certain we're in it together spirit. And we all have a common bond around something that we are all experiencing in different ways, but that we're all experiencing. And I think to take it one step deeper, that experience has really stripped us down to the studs. And there is a certain barrier between human beings that I have felt has been lifted. And in that, we have a little bit more access to one another's humanity, to one another's vulnerability. I think about we have a wonderful program called Days of Learning that's actually learned from a lot of your teaching, actually inspired by a lot of your teaching, where we have a group of basically baby boomers and a little older who have created wonderful adult learning experiences. And they include clergy teaching, but really they include teaching from all of our congregants, and lots of people have something to teach and to share. And we shifted that to virtual, like many other things, a year ago. And I taught months ago. I taught a session for this program about the Psalms because they asked for it, and we very quickly were able to move into a spiritual and sometimes even personal conversation in relationship to the words of the Psalms. And I think we would have gotten there any other year, but it's possible that we got to that level of depth a little more quickly because we're all sort of stripped down a little bit. And we start with this common understanding of what we're moving through, of the losses we've experienced, of the potential isolation and loneliness in our everyday lives right now. And it makes it, I think it makes the way we matter to each other, it makes that even clearer. It already was true, but maybe it's a little more obvious now.
So in other words, the pandemic has exacerbated this, you think, amongst many of your congregants?
I think it magnifies everything.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it magnifies everything.
Have you found a generational difference, Jill, in the people in the congregation? That, I mean, you mentioned the program with the baby boomers and stuff at RS, but have you found the same sense of, to use your words, vulnerability or openness when you're dealing with other generations?
Absolutely. And this program that was started for baby boomers by baby boomers, actually we have all different generations attending now, especially because everyone's schedules are so much more flexible, different. We actually have a lot of young adults who are now participating in that because they love it and the door is open to them. I see this openness with all different generations, and I see the different generations crossing each other's lives a little bit differently as well, because we're often on Zoom together. Our schedules are a little bit more overlapped, perhaps, because so much of our external schedule and program in our lives no longer exists. And so there's actually been a multi-generational experience to all of this for me. I think one of the biggest difference is actually not generation to generation. I think one of the biggest differences is for people who live alone versus people who live with, right now, what can feel like too many people. and different needs for those different groups, to very different experiences. And we really have our eye on the many, many congregants who live alone. The city's a great place to live if you live alone. And so we have many congregants in that reality.
Yeah, we should mention that for people who don't know the city, that Rodeph Shalom is an in-town congregation, and is for many members of this congregation, all the attractions of Center City, Philadelphia, are walkable. It's
Right.
Philly, that type of a city. What about, because we're starting to see some of this in conversation. What about your rabbinate? We're hearing, and I've talked to some colleagues, that the pressures as a result of the pandemic have really increased, and the pressures on the rabbinate, the cantorate, the professionals are greater. There's a greater stress level and less time to de-stress. Are you finding that amongst you and your staff?
I think, I don't know if it's more or less or if it's just different, but the pressures were already there. I'm in a very demanding workplace. We choose it to be demanding, and we are ambitious, and we put a lot of pressure on ourselves. And so that was already there. There is an extra layer in the work of reinvention. So the previous challenges still exist, whether it be, funding. We have many people who are engaged, who participate, and who are grateful to do so. We don't always have enough translation of that into financial support. That remains, right? And so those old challenges don't go away, and we've added these layers of the reinvention. And so that certainly adds to the pressures of my rabbinate and the pressures of our whole staff. Our whole team feels it. And many in our team are among those folks who live alone also. We've many young adults. We have all generations and on our professional team. And Rodeph Shalom's staff becomes somewhat of a support and a family for the team. And so I feel an added sense of responsibility around that as well. So yes, we definitely have added layers of responsibility. I think at the same time, I have felt a sense of faith in my people and gratitude that the congregation has come over to this virtual world with us and with enthusiasm has connected at a time when we just so long for connection. And that we've been able to make that work has been an incredibly fulfilling aspect of my rabbinate. And so in some ways, that creativity and that gratitude has fueled me as much as the added layers of pressure have become an additional source of stress.
So picking up on what you just said, and
can you hear the construction outside my house?
Yeah, it's in the city. It's in the city. It comes with the turf. I mean, that's the wonderful thing about this pandemic is I'm on a regular call with somebody, and invariably their lawn people come by, and you hear the weed whackers. It's just like part of the new reality. It's part of the new reality.
It's like, very human.
When you're doing service, I have this theory that every colleague, when this is over, will be able to write their Zoom book, and all of us will have this tons of Zoom stories. Say we're doing services and we're in the middle of this passionate thing about deep spirituality, and you look up on the screen and half the people are eating dinner. It's like, or they're asleep, or they're playing with their dog. That happened to me once a couple of times, where somebody left, the dog jumps on the screen, and I did a prayer, and I said, we all say amen, and the dog went, like that, like the dog understood Hebrew. Yeah. Everybody's going to have these stories.
Exactly.
No, you just roll with it. However, good segue. So the congregation has gotten used to it. This has been our life, but I really want to, and part of our little series here is, okay, well, what's going to happen here as we emerge from this thing? So the congregation is used to I would bet that your attendance at high holidays and many of your services, the attendance is up. As you emerge from this, are you going back? How do you, as the rabbi of Rodeph Shalom, envision this synagogue, leading this synagogue out of the pandemic? How much are you going to take of the virtual life? Is your future hybrid? how are you beginning to plan this personally and congregationally?
There's no going back. I think that that's the case in life, not just in pandemic. There's no going back. There's only going forward. And we have to learn from this period. I think, you've been teaching us for years, Richard, that there are so many different ways to connect, and that this virtual platform is an important way to be a part of that collection. Absolutely. The virtual, what's that?
You listen. Thank you.
I've been listening to you for years, my teacher. Absolutely. Absolutely. And so I think that, part of the lesson is this is just one tool. We'll learn others in the future, but this virtual tool becomes more and more important. Another lesson you've taught us throughout these years, Richard, is that we have all different kinds of members of the Jewish family, and we need to be inclusive and help everyone experience a sense of belonging. And this has opened our eyes to a lot of that. Moving forward, I think my biggest concern is not the hybrid, the technical, the virtual. Some folks are worried, well, now that we've provided this convenience, will everyone stay home? I don't believe they will. I think that we have something compelling that we experience when we're together. And I welcome them to remain at home when sometimes that's what works for them, or that's what makes it possible for them to tune in. So that doesn't bother me. It actually inspires me to think about how can we make it a compelling reality to have both of those communities present at the same time? How can we need to technically determine how to provide excellence to two audiences at the same time. Beyond the technical, how can we find ways to actually create an experience where the people who are in person, let's say in the sanctuary or at the Torah study, where the people in person are actually strengthened by the fact that there are people tuning in from the virtual? And how can we make it meaningful for the people in the virtual that there are people who are actually in person in that sanctuary? How do these groups strengthen each other and find some synergies? I think that's a really interesting question that we're starting to experiment with and think about for when we do come back and move forward into this hybrid reality. My greater concern or curiosity is what happens when people have lots of parts of their lives that are suddenly available again? What happens when everything from last year is rescheduled for next year and everyone's quite busy once again? And and we will be challenged to make sure that congregational life remains compelling even when people's lives are busy once again. We this year have had an extraordinary experience with our congregational anti-racism group. We have a group that does the work of anti-racism within ourselves, our community, and our world. And we have met more frequently this year, both because the world demands it and we have not been able to avert our eyes from the injustices in the world, but also because we're available and we've been able to be nimble and come together on Zoom, but come together in very meaningful ways to do both learning and justice action. My prayer is that we remain compelling enough that that work continues at that level of rigor, of strength, that we can continue together to bring people together, whether it's virtual or in person.
Yeah, I think you're right. I mean, the scheduling thing, when people have the opportunity on, they can go to the concert and they go to the movies, if everybody ever goes back to a movie theater, but all this type of stuff, that's really going to be a challenge that the people, like I said, you said, just starting to think about, which is again, to channel what you were referring to, because people are now used to, they're going to record that lecture, they're going to record that meeting. So I have theater tickets or I have concert tickets in Philly, but I'm going to miss that very important meeting. But when I get home or tomorrow morning, I can go and attend that meeting because we got used to, they're going to record it so I can go to it. So it's all going to, you're right. It's all possible. The rewiring of a synagogue is going to be, because you may have to rewire religious school rooms and meeting rooms so that I don't want to, in the middle of February when it's freezing rain. And for those of you not in the Northeast, but I want to go to that meeting, but I'll Zoom it because now the meeting room is wired for electronics. Also,
yes,
membership.
I think the other, I think the other side of that is, I can't do that for every meeting and still expect to feel the same sense of connection. I can do that to catch up on a meeting now and then. But, again, as you've taught us over the years, we can get content in a lot of places. It's community connection that we need the congregation to provide. And so if I'm always just listening in a day later, I'm getting some of the content. Maybe I'm then contributing my ideas with an email or something, but there's a limit there. There's a lack of connection if I'm not in the moment, at least some of the time.
Do you see any change as you're evolving and moving out of the pandemic and how you're going to define what it means to be a member of your synagogue? Is it possible? Because I've been talking to congregations now, and I believe this, that as a result of the pandemic, geography is irrelevant. You're based in Philly, but you can have members from all over the country and all over the world. And have you begun to talk about in membership? Well, maybe we can create a new level of membership for people who are very comfortable. They like what we do. They like our service. They like our education. They happen to live in Toledo. They happen to live in Buenos Aires, or they happen to live in London, and they can attend. Has that begun to have a conversation about that? Cool.
Absolutely.
That's
actually
really cool.
These conversations actually were already happening before the pandemic. The pandemic has accelerated everything. So we already had out of town members. There was a different, now there's a different way that we're providing for those folks. But we were also already talking about the fact that the membership models we currently live in work for many of us. Many of us really feel that sense of relationship, of whole community, but they were really shaped in a different generation, and we haven't updated them. And there is likely a whole population we're missing, even within Philadelphia, a whole population of Jews, seekers, and geography or not, there are folks who are perhaps interested in connecting, but are not necessarily ready to jump into a full membership. And what are we missing? Who are we not reaching because we have limited ways to become a member? And so we had already, and we've continued to start to think about how we can experiment with different ways to have a relationship with the congregation. So
if you could blue sky, just dream, you're running everything. Okay. There's no process that will be involved. It's just, what's your dream? What's your dream as the rabbi of this synagogue emerging from the pandemic? What do you want this synagogue to look like?
I would like us to learn from this experience. I think the following two things. I think two themes that have emerged in this conversation. One is that we have the opportunity to be in a congregation where we turn deeply inward, and we are our whole full selves when we come to congregation. When we come to community, we do not check our vulnerabilities at the door. We are visible to each other in our fullest selves. We are present with each other in our fullest selves. That includes all of the equity, inclusion, diversity work that we're doing. And they typically call DEI, diversity, equity, inclusion. We've switched the letters around to call it EID, same thing, but equity, inclusion, diversity, so that it's the Hebrew word witness, that we can be fully witness to one another in a covenantal community. And I think that the pandemic experience has actually helped us bring more of our humanity, more of our fullness into community. And I think that will be a part of what makes us a more meaningful place to be for those who are already present. That will be a part of what helps us to gather once again in a way that's even more meaningful. I think that there are lots of programs we can provide, but if we bring that sense of connection and sort of take down some of the barriers that often exist in society, I think that makes our congregational life more connected and more meaningful. There was a Shiva I did years ago, and actually after the Shiva, I was checking in with this widow, and she talked about how there were so many people there supporting her, and yet she still felt lonely. You can be with lots of people and still feel alone. And during the pandemic, I think our challenge has been that the opposite can be true also, that we can be not with any other people and yet not feel alone because we're able to connect. You know, my nightmare is that we go back and we're with lots of people, but people still feel lonely. So my prayer is that we're able to find ways to bring the sense of connection back into physical presence with one another. So that's the inward thinking I'm doing. The outward thinking is much of what you say about geography and beyond. Who is out there in the world who does not yet necessarily have any connection to Judaism, but might be a seeker? We have 50 people taking Introduction to Judaism this year, and regularly, but even virtually. And I think that's just scratching the surface of the seekers who are out there who could come in on their own terms. It doesn't have to be in our former membership packaging, but in what ways can we bring Jewish life and meaning to more people who are seeking? I think that we have not yet really reached the capacity of our reach and our community. And so coming back together and moving forward, my dream would be to touch more people and to learn from those seekers on how we as a congregation can constantly transform so that we can be a place of meaning and so that we can be a place that constantly learns from Torah and how to bring transformation to our city and our world in all of its brokenness. To me, those lessons from the pandemic will help us do what we've always longed to do. I think that Judaism has held up. Jewish wisdom this year has held up. Jewish wisdom has, I think, held us up and itself held up. I think that what we learn from our tradition has become only truer, only deeper in people's lives. And our congregational vision also, I think, has held up and continues to move us forward. Our Rodeph Shalom vision is immersed in Jewish time, guided by enduring values, compelled to moral action, we create profound connections. And I think that all we've learned and all we want to become continues to live in those words of our vision.
Well, you've laid out the opportunity. What you really, I'm hearing also you say is as we emerge out of this pandemic as congregations, this is an unbelievable creative opportunity. And if we choose to think and not be bound by what was, but open up to the future, like the letter Bet in the beginning of the Torah, there's tremendous opportunities for growth, creativity, and thinking the new thoughts. So let me, and again, thank you. And this is why, and I really do thank you. This is why you are one of the really rising, if I'm going to use the word rising stars in the Rabbinate, because you have that sense and that Tom and Jill, and I thank you. So I'm going to end by this another softball question. How has your faith changed? How has your faith been challenged in this pandemic?
My faith in God has always been challenged. I many days I have a sense of faith, many days I don't. And it's always transformed. I believe that my personal lived experience has changed my faith in an ongoing way. I don't know that my faith in God has changed this year. I think that my faith in my congregation has blossomed as I've seen the way they've reached out to one another, constantly calling, raising their hand to call people who may feel lonely. I think my faith in my congregation in the way they've reached out to the neighbors. We have a weekly, essentially an outdoor food pantry now, so that we can come in masks and welcome people to get their essential needs met. I think my faith in people has really blossomed. And that's where I come away with such an enhanced sense of gratitude. And much of my own personal faith in God is actually rooted in gratitude. So there's a connection there. But I think as much as I am often challenged in my faith in God, I do feel a consistent sense that I am part of something greater than myself. And that has to do with God. It has to do with holiness. It has to do with human beings. That I've felt all the more so when we've been sharing so much of our experience this year.
Rabbi Jill Maderer, the senior rabbi of Congregation Rodeph Shalom here in Philadelphia. Thank you very much, Jill. And I wish you continued success, continued reinvention, forced or otherwise. So thank you very much. Say hello to your family and the congregation for me. And just stay healthy, stay safe. Toda Rabbah.
Richard, it's so great to be with you. Thank you, and sending strength to you as well.
Thank you. Appreciate it. To all of you, thank you again for watching and listening to today's edition of Seekers of Meanings TV show and podcast of Jewish Sacred Aging. Remember, the show is available there's a TV broadcast on the Roku network. If you don't know what that is, ask your grandchildren, and they'll be able to tell you in a minute what it is. And again, we welcome your comments and suggestions, which you can email me at rabbiaddress@jewishsacredaging.com, and we invite you to visit the Jewish Sacred Aging Facebook page. If you'd like to make a tax-free donation so that we can continue to support our work, go to the jewishsacredaging.com homepage, click on the icon button. Seekers of Meaning is produced at the Broadcast Center of Lubetkin Media Companies in beautiful Cherry Hill, New Jersey, and we give a shout out as usual to our producer, Steve Lubetkin. I'm your host, Rabbi Richard Address, and I look forward to greeting you on our next TV show and podcast of Seekers of Meaning for Jewish Sacred Aging. Take care, stay safe, stay vaccinated, wear your mask. Shalom, Todah. Thank you.